All right, so Airbnb, huh? A 15% stock jump after hours. That's got to make you raise an eyebrow. Definitely not your average day on Wall Street.
No, not at all. And, it's not like this came out of left field. We're talking about a company with a market cap, what, over $100 billion. Airbnb is playing in the big leagues now.
It is wild to think, right? From air mattresses on the floor to a global travel giant. To get to the bottom of this, we've got two main things we're looking at.
Okay.
One is an in-depth financial analysis of Airbnb. This is as of February 17th, 2025, so right up to date. And we've also got this news article breaking down their fourth quarter earnings for 2024.
And we want to do more than just repeat the headlines, right? We're gonna really try to give everyone listening a real solid understanding of Airbnb's their financial health, their strategy, and ultimately whether someone like the average person, should think about investing.
So let's start with the basics. Just how much money are we talking about here? This financial analysis lays it out pretty clearly. Airbnb brought in $11.1 billion in revenue over the last 12 months. But even more impressive, their net income, a staggering $2.65 billion with a profit margin, get this, of almost 24%.
And what those numbers tell us is that people are really using Airbnb, right? Demand is strong, revenue's up about 12% year over year, and they're turning a good chunk of that revenue into profit. 24%, that's a really healthy margin, especially when you compare them to other companies in the travel industry.
And there's this one number that I have to ask about, a gross margin of over 83%. Now, I'm not a financial expert, so maybe you could explain what that means and why it's such a big deal.
Sure, so gross margin, it's basically how much money a company keeps from its revenue after they pay for the direct costs of providing those services. So for Airbnb, that's mainly the cost of connecting travelers with hosts and managing all those bookings. 83% tells us they're doing that very efficiently.
So they're making money, keeping most of it. What about their cash flow? That's got to be important for any company trying to grow and expand.
Oh, absolutely. Cash flow is essential. It gives them the flexibility to invest in new things, explore new markets. Airbnb has a very strong cash flow position right now.
That's good to hear. Okay, so let's talk about the earnings report that sent their stock skyrocketing. Earnings per share, they blew past expectations, 73 cents compared to the 58 cents analysts were predicting.
Yeah, and it's not just about beating those predictions. It's that earnings number represents some pretty significant growth year over year, that consistency. That's what gets investors excited.
For sure, and they also beat revenue estimates, bringing in $2.48 billion compared to a projected $2.42 billion. So what's driving this? Let's look closer at the report and see what we can find.
One thing that stands out is their focus on technology. Airbnb completely revamped their tech platform, and we're seeing the results. Higher conversion rates, which means more people who visit the site are actually booking stays. That's a huge win for them.
And there's all this buzz about these new products they're going to launch in May. Still a bit of a mystery, but definitely points to some big moves on the horizon.
Yeah, smart move. Keep people guessing, keep them excited. They're constantly introducing new things, which keeps users engaged, attracts new customers, and, who knows, maybe even lets them branch out beyond just accommodations into something, a more complete travel experience.
Yeah, like a whole ecosystem, they're also making a big push internationally, especially into these emerging markets. Makes sense, right? Huge untapped potential there.
Absolutely. New travelers, new markets, places where maybe traditional hotels aren't as strong. It's a solid growth strategy, and it fits with that, belong anywhere idea.
And to top it off, they're projecting strong revenue for the first quarter of 2025, even higher than analysts expected.
It early, of course, and we'll have to see how it actually plays out. But yeah, their guidance is optimistic, really exceeding expectations.
So they're making money, they've got a solid plan, everything seems to be going their way. But I guess the big question is, what does this all mean in the big picture?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. When we connect these financial results to Airbnb's overall vision, we can see they're not just building a company, they're creating a whole travel ecosystem, what they call perfecting the core service. It's not just listings, it's about the whole experience from start to finish.
Trying to change how we think about travel, right? Belong anywhere, it's a big idea.
Exactly. Connecting people, making travel more accessible, more personal, it's ambitious. But, these financial results, they show they're on the right track.
And we can't forget about Airbnb.org, their nonprofit arm. They really stepped up after those wildfires in Los Angeles, helping to house thousands of people who were displaced.
Yeah, it shows they're not just about the bottom line, right? There's a social impact side to the story. And that resonates with people, especially younger travelers who, care about ethical companies.
Absolutely, but let's be real, no investment is without risk. What are some of the challenges, the potential downsides that Airbnb might face going forward?
Well, competition is fierce. New companies popping up all the time, and the big players like Booking.com and Expedia, they're not just going to disappear. Airbnb has to stay agile, keep innovating.
And then there's the whole regulatory maze, right? Every city, every country, different rules about short-term rentals. That's got to be a headache.
It is. It is a constant challenge. They've run into roadblocks in places like New York and Paris where those regulations are really tight. Airbnb's success hinges on their ability to navigate those legal waters.
And of course, we can't forget about the economy. A global downturn could really hit travel demand hard, and that would definitely impact Airbnb's revenue.
Absolutely. They've shown they can be resilient, like during the pandemic, but no one's immune to those big economic swings.
Right, so to recap, strong financials, a clear strategy, lots of momentum, but Airbnb's stock is trading at a premium right now. What's your take on their valuation as an expert?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Their PE ratio is quite high, meaning investors are really betting on that continued growth. And while their performance recently justifies some optimism, it's important to remember that any slowdown could lead to a correction.
It's a classic risk-reward situation, weighing the potential upside against the potential downsides. So for someone listening, thinking about investing in Airbnb, what's your final thought? Is it worth the risk?
It's a personal decision. There's no easy answer. Airbnb has a lot going for it, but there are real challenges too, like we've been talking about. It's about weighing those pros and cons, knowing your own comfort level with risk, and then making an informed decision.
It's a fascinating company for sure. Airbnb's success really makes you wonder about the future of travel. Is this a permanent change or is it just a fad? What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think Airbnb has tacked into something real, this desire for authentic travel, connecting with local cultures, having those personal experiences. People want more than just a place to stay. They want to really experience a place.
Yeah, they're not just selling accommodations, they're selling an idea.
Exactly, and that's where this idea of expanding beyond just lodging gets really interesting. These new products they're launching in May, who knows what they'll be, but I bet they'll be focused on enhancing that whole travel experience, right? Personal recommendations, local tours, maybe even partnerships with transportation companies to make everything seamless.
Imagine booking a stay in, I don't know, a charming Italian village through Airbnb, and they connect you with a local chef for a cooking class or a guide who can take you to hidden hiking trails.
Exactly. They're using technology to create a level of personalization that you just wouldn't get from a travel agency. They're building a travel experience that fits each person, making travel more immersive, more meaningful.
But doesn't that also come with a risk? I mean, could this lead to, I don't know, a kind of homogenization of travel where everything starts to feel the same no matter where you go?
It's a valid point. It's important for Airbnb to find that balance, offering quality, consistency, but also preserving what makes each place unique. They need to make sure local communities benefit, that they're not overrun with tourists, that housing costs don't skyrocket.
That's where their commitment to sustainability and working with those communities comes in. They've been pretty vocal about wanting to be a responsible part of the travel industry.
It's an ongoing process, right? It's not easy. But so far, it seems like they're genuinely trying to do things the right way. They're focused on more than just profit. They want to have a positive impact.
It's an ambitious goal, and it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But for now, I think we can all agree Airbnb is a force to be reckoned with. They're changing the game, and it feels like we're just at the beginning of the story.
Absolutely. Their financial success shows that what they're doing is working, and it's a remarkable story, really navigating a pandemic, economic uncertainty, competition, and coming out on top. Who knows what the next chapter holds?
So as we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Okay, well, first, Airbnb is doing very well financially. They have a history of strong growth, and they're profitable. They're executing their strategy effectively, and that recent earnings report, it shows they're in a good position to keep succeeding.
And it's not just about finding a place to stay, right? They're building a whole travel experience tailored to what people are looking for.
Exactly, and that raises some bigger questions about the future of travel. Are we seeing a real shift in how people travel, or is this a passing trend? It's something to think about.
Absolutely. It's been a really interesting conversation so far. And thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us. We hope you're learning something new and feeling inspired to maybe see the world a little differently.
We'll be back to continue this conversation in part two. Until then, keep exploring.
Okay, so we've seen how well Airbnb is doing financially, but they're not operating in a vacuum, right? There's competition, there are challenges they have to overcome to stay on top.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest hurdles for any company in travel right now is all the regulations. It's a constantly changing landscape. Cities, countries are still figuring out how to deal with short-term rentals, and Airbnb is well, they're often right in the middle of it.
Yeah, and we've seen this play out in some major cities already, right? New York, Paris, Barcelona, places where they've really cracked down on short-term rentals. What are some of the specific challenges that Airbnb is up against, and how are they adapting to deal with them?
Well, like in New York, they've got limits on how many nights you can rent out a place, and then you've got all these registration requirements, licensing. It's pretty complicated. And then Paris, they've put restrictions on how many properties can even be listed in certain neighborhoods. And a lot of this comes down to, worries about housing costs going up and whether these rentals are changing the character of neighborhoods.
Yeah, so it seems like Airbnb is walking a bit of a tightrope here, right? Trying to work within these rules, but also, keep their platform user-friendly and appealing. How are they managing that?
They're trying a few different things. They're talking directly with city officials, trying to, explain the economic benefits of short-term rentals. And they're also working with local groups to address some of the community concerns. And
So it's not just about fighting regulations, it's about being part of the conversation, finding solutions that work for everybody.
right, exactly. And they're using technology too to help, hosts and guests follow the rules. Like they've got these tools now that can automatically block bookings if they go over the limit in a city or flag properties that haven't been registered properly.
That's pretty smart. It shows they're serious about complying with these regulations and being, a responsible player. But what about the other companies, the competition? It's not just Airbnb out there anymore.
Yeah, the travel industry, it's a tough business, lots of competition. Traditional hotels, they're stepping up their game. And then you've got, newer companies like Vrbo and Sonder. They're all vying for those same customers.
They've built a strong brand. People trust them. They've got a loyal following, but they can't just sit back and relax. How are they staying ahead of the pack? How are they different?
One thing that really sets them apart is their focus on experiences. It's not just about finding a roof over your head. It's about immersing yourself in the local culture, having those unique travel moments. They've been putting a lot of effort into curating those experiences, like cooking classes with local chefs, guided tours of these hidden, off the beaten path neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's something I've always liked about Airbnb. It's more than just a hotel room. It's about the whole experience. I remember, I think it was a few years ago, I booked a stay in this farmhouse in Tuscany, and the host, he actually took us truffle hunting with his dog. It was incredible, an experience I'll never forget.
Exactly. It's those kinds of memories, those connections. You don't get that from a standard hotel.
Yeah, yeah. So experiences are key. But they're also a tech company at heart, right? How's technology helping them stay competitive?
Well, their platform is a big advantage. They've invested a ton in machine learning and AI to personalize recommendations, make sure search results are relevant, and just generally make the whole experience smooth and easy for users. They're also used tech to, make things safer, things like background checks for hosts and guests, secure messaging, 24/7 customer support.
It seems like they're always innovating, pushing the envelope in the travel industry. But as they grow, there's this other challenge they face, right? How to balance their business goals with social responsibility, sustainability, things like that. How are they doing that?
It's something a lot of companies are wrestling with, especially in tech. And Airbnb has made some progress. They've got programs to promote diversity and inclusion. They've partnered with organizations to help house refugees and provide, support after disasters.
Yeah, their Airbnb.org initiative, I remember reading about that. They helped a lot of people find housing after the California wildfires. I think it was a couple years back.
Yeah, that's a good example of how they're using their platform to do good. And they've also made commitment to, reduce their environmental impact, encourage sustainable travel, and work with hosts to be more eco-friendly.
It's good to see that they're, thinking about the bigger picture, not just the profits. But is there anything you think they could be doing better in terms of social impact, sustainability?
I think one area where they could maybe make a bigger difference is housing affordability. We've seen that short-term rentals can, in some cases, drive up housing costs, especially in touristy areas. I think Airbnb could do more to address that, maybe work with cities to develop affordable housing programs or create policies that discourage hosts from turning long-term rentals into short-term ones.
That's an important point. They need to be aware of those potential downsides and try to find solutions. And then there's the whole issue of of staying authentic, avoiding becoming too cookie cutter as they expand into, all these different cultures and markets? How do they keep that local flavor, that unique character, while still offering a consistent and high quality experience?
It's a tough balance for sure. They've been trying to incorporate local knowledge and be sensitive to different cultures. Like they've got these curated guides now created by local experts that highlight those hidden gems, the off the beaten path places. And they're, translating their platform into different languages, adapting their marketing to fit, different cultural contexts.
Sounds like they're putting a lot of effort into, making sure the experience is authentic but also accessible to a global audience.
It's an ongoing process, and it's not always easy, but they seem to understand the importance of respecting local communities and cultures, and they're trying to integrate that into how they do business.
So we've talked about regulations, competition, the whole social responsibility angle. It's a lot to take in. What are some of the key takeaways you want our listeners to keep in mind as we move into the final part of our conversation?
I think the big takeaway is that Airbnb, it's a company in motion. They're constantly adapting, to all these changes and challenges. They've had amazing success, but they're also facing some pretty big hurdles. Their ability to keep innovating, to stay true to their values. That's what's going to determine whether they succeed in the long run.
Absolutely. Well said. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll step back and look at the bigger picture. What does Airbnb's success tell us about, the future of travel, technology, how we live, all of that? All right, welcome back. So we've talked about Airbnb's, financial performance, their strategy, the challenges they face. But now I want to step back a bit, look at the bigger picture. What does Airbnb's success tell us about travel, about how we travel now, maybe even about how we live?
It's a really good question. I think, Airbnb didn't just create a business. They tapped into something about how people are, this need to connect, to have authentic experiences, to feel like you belong somewhere, even when you're traveling.
Yeah, and it makes you think, right? Does this go beyond travel? Is it a bigger shift, culturally? Are we moving away from owning things and towards this more shared, more collaborative way of life?
I think there are definitely some connections with other things that are happening. The sharing economy, people wanting experiences instead of just stuff, and this awareness of our impact on the planet. Airbnb it's almost like a little example of those bigger changes.
Okay, so let's imagine, what if Airbnb is just the start? What other parts of our lives could be changed by this idea of sharing and connecting with people directly?
But we're already seeing it in things like ride sharing and those co-working spaces, right? But I think it could go way beyond that. Imagine a world where we share not just our homes, but our cars, our tools, even our skills, like, teaching each other things.
It's almost like going back to a more communal way of living, but with technology, instead of depending on big companies or institutions, we're relying on each other, using these platforms to build trust and connect.
Yeah, and that has some really, profound implications. It could mean, using resources more efficiently, consuming less, having stronger communities. It could give people, ways to make money, to access things that they couldn't before.
But there are risks too, right? What about, people taking advantage of others, or privacy issues, or even, workers losing protections?
Those are definitely valid concerns, and it's really important that we think about those things as these platforms become more a part of our lives. We have to make sure they're fair, that they're sustainable, that they benefit everyone.
So it's not perfect, right? There are going to be challenges, but it's still a really interesting idea. And Airbnb, even with its flaws, it shows us what can happen when we change how we think about, how we live, how we work, how we connect with each other.
And it shows that, these big changes, they don't always come from huge companies or governments. Sometimes it's a simple idea, someone willing to challenge the way things are done, someone who understands what people really need.
It's been a really great conversation. I've learned a lot. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into Airbnb, helping us understand not just the company, but what it all means.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, really. And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep an open mind. There's so much out there. And The most exciting things, you often find them in the most unexpected places.
That's a great way to put it. So until next time, keep diving deep. Top 818.